order. This is the Senate Transportation, Finance, and Policy Committee, Thursday, January 28th, 2021. We are operating by Zoom. Consequently, I would urge everybody to take a look at their computer and mute yourself.
With the University of Minnesota.
Bentley, if you would mute yourself, please. Thank you. That's what happens. So just kind of watch your computer, make sure that you are muted. Members, we have 4 bills on the agenda today that we are going to move forward with. The first 2 are memorial highway bills authored by Senator Johnson. The first bill is Senate File 256. Senator Johnson, to your bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity this year to present these bills before you. I know these were bills that we had last year that, due to the circumstances of the year, were put off, but it's maybe even more, timely to have these bills up before your committee this year with the year that law enforcement has had, and we've seen the sacrifices that they've made throughout the year, providing safety services to our state and to our country. This is just a way to give honor to those who've made the ultimate sacrifice. And we will start with, like you say, Senate File 256. I'll end there, and I'll let our testifier, Mr. Tuttle, give a little bit of the background behind why this and the next bill are very important to northern Minnesota.
Mr. Tuttle, welcome to the committee. If you would state your full name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, sir. My name is Robert John Tuttle. I live up here in Roseau County, and I thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to testify here today on these 2, I think, very important bills. And are we with 256 right now?
256, that is correct.
So 256, I moved up here, started my career at the U.S. Border Patrol down in San Diego. I'm a North Dakota native and moved up to Roseau County in 1998. And it wasn't very long after I moved here, I realized who Richard Magnuson was and the events that happened in 1978 when he was a very young deputy from International Falls, Minnesota, came over to Roseau County to start his career. And unfortunately, very early in his career, he was shot and killed just north of Roseau, a few miles on Highway 310. And a very unfortunate circumstance in the fact that a Canadian citizen had ran the port of entry, the Roseau port of entry, in the middle of the night. Back in those days, it was just orange cones across the highway, and it was fairly common that people would blow through a closed port of entry, but most of the time it was kids up taking advantage of the younger age to party up there. And most of the times the issues weren't very large ones. And well, in this case, this man was armed and had shot a couple people up in Canada just days previous, and he gunned down Mr. Magnuson just north of town. These bills are something that have been on my mind. This one and the next one we're going to discuss for many, many years, and I procrastinated way too long. We should have went through these motions years ago, but as I was getting close to retiring from the Border Patrol, I wanted to make sure that we could get these up and rolling, and I absolutely appreciate you, sir, looking at this and hopefully getting this and the next bill to fruition here in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle, for your testimony. We also have as a testifier former Representative Dan Fabian. Are you there?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Nice to see you, Dan.
Good
Please
afternoon.
proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it is okay with you, I'd like to actually just testify on both bills so I don't take up most of your time.
No, unfortunately, we have to process this bill first.
Okay.
Then we'll come back to the second bill.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to testify here today on this file, Senate File 256 and later 257. Want to give a big shout out to Senator Mark Johnson and also to Representative John Burkle. Both of those legislators have made a strong commitment to getting these two bills passed and signed into law. As you know, the bills are Memorial Highway designation bills. 256 honors Richard Magnuson. Agent Tuttle talked a little bit ago about how he moved here in 1998, I believe. Yeah, 98. I moved here in 1976. And I can remember very vividly the day that Officer Magnuson lost his life. In fact, the nurse that took care of him is very, very, very close to me. You know, and the interesting thing about that is this has gone on a long time. And today is a really good day to kind of get the ball rolling on this. I need to give a very, very special shout out and thanks to Officer Tuttle and then also Roseau County Sheriff Steve Gust. These two guys have been very instrumental in helping to get the bills drafted and moving forward and across the finish line. And I'm looking forward to the day that the memorial signs are in place along highways 11 and 310. And more people will be made more aware of the fact that these two very dedicated and brave men actually had their lives taken from them while they were serving and protecting others. I'd be remiss, Mr. Chair, if I didn't give my most sincere thank you to you and, of course, to all of the brave men and women that put on a uniform every day and go out and serve and protect us 24/7, 365. If you have any questions, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer them. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Representative Fabian, for your testimony. That is all of the testifiers that I have listed. Members, have you any questions of either the author or the testifiers? I am not seeing any. Senator Johnson, any final comments?
Just one other point that we should make here. You don't see a dollar amount with that. And Officer Tuttle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that has been private funds that have been raised to provide for the signage for those highways that this would go up on, right?
Officer Tuttle, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Johnson, yes, it will be. And to be quite honest with you, I've not began that phase of it yet. I've had several commitments. I know where the revenues are going to come from, and I got a pretty good idea that it's going to be a very easy lift to secure the monies to do this. I look forward to doing it.
Officer Tuttle, I did one of these a few years ago, and the easiest fundraiser I was ever involved in. So I don't anticipate you will have any trouble whatsoever. Any final comments, Senator Johnson?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Johnson. At this time, I would entertain a motion to move Senate 256 be recommended to pass and be placed on the general register. Senator Coleman, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that Senate File 256 be recommended to pass and be referred to general orders.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. We're going to do this by a voice vote. I would ask members to please unmute yourself. And when I call for the vote, vote audibly. And if you wouldn't mind, please also give a thumbs up. Then I'll be calling for a nay vote, and I'll be asking for a thumbs down. All those in favor of the motion before us on Senate File 256, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, no with a thumb down, please. The motion passes. Senator Johnson, you are on the way to the floor with your bill 256. Congratulations. Next up is Senate File 257. This is another Memorial Highway bill. Senator Johnson, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what we can do is go straight to Officer Tuttle and Mayor Fabian.
Well, now I just learned something. I didn't realize that he was now the mayor. But we'll go to Officer Tuttle first. Officer Tuttle.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, again, to allow me to testify for this important legislation. Just like 256, 257, I don't want to say it's even more important to me. It's got a little different feel to it in the fact that Patrol Inspector Robert Lobdell was really forgotten. Unlike Richard Magnuson, 1978 isn't all that long ago, and he has been remembered here. But 1928, Mr. Lobdell, a St. Paul native, was shot and killed just east of Roseau on Highway 11. And over the years, it really did become a forgotten event. And an old retired Border Patrol agent had mentioned to me that he had heard stories.
Mr. Tuttle, I'm gonna stop. Mr.
Sure.
Tuttle,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop you. You cut out for us when you got to the point where he was shot just east of Roseau. Could you pick up from there, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Lobdell is a native of St. Paul, and I think I'd mentioned earlier he was kind of forgotten in the histories here, but he was shot and killed just just east of Roseau on Highway 11 on Christmas Day, 1928. So with that, we were able to piece together some pretty neat history and really identify who he was, the events that occurred. I had the chance through our district judge up here to actually see the file, which was very personal to me, very humbling. It was the conviction file of the man that murdered Mr. Lobdell, to include the bullet as evidence, the business card the murderer had passed out to various residents of Roseau County as he traversed through the county. So it was really an important event for me for me and the Border Patrol to piece together and to get all of our facts in line, and bills like this, such as a highway designation, is really just another piece that we can do to make sure we remember men like Mr. Lobdell and Mr. Magnuson. And again, I do appreciate the opportunity to do this and do look forward to it happening. So thank you very much.
Mr. Tuttle, I noticed.
Mr. Chair, you broke up on us. I'm not sure if you can hear us or not.
I think he froze up. I'm going to continue on until he gets on as the vice chair. Representative. Oh, he's back. Thank you. Chair Newman, go ahead. I was just covering for you. You froze up there for a second.
Maybe it's my computer that is freezing up then. Senator Jasinski, do you have Mr. Tuttle live? I do not.
I have him live. You froze up, so I'm just going to turn it over to Representative Fabian for his testimony on this until your video starts working.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dan Fabian back here again. You froze up. It's you probably should be in Roseau because it is below freezing or below zero up here today. But I just want to say thanks again to Senator Johnson and Patrol Agent Tuttle for the work that they're putting in to get this done. This is really a big deal. You know, when you stop to think about 1928 and where we are today, 92 or 93 years later, you know, the Lobdell family is going to get the recognition that they so rightfully deserve. And, you know, when these signs go up along Highway 11 and Highway 310, I think that it's going to speak volumes about the dedicated service that so many men and women who put on a uniform every day and the risks that they take. We need to appreciate them, and this is one way to do that. So thank you again, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Chair, you're muted.
Okay, Senator Jasinski, if you just, and members, if you wait one moment, I'm gonna put my computer in the docking station, and hopefully that's gonna clear up the problem, but I'll be back in just a minute.
Senator Kiffmeyer, I know you had some Ole and Lena jokes. Maybe this would be a good time to kill time.
Oh dear, oh dear. Yes, I had a great opportunity a while ago to be shopping up in Lindstrom and found some fortune cookies for Ole and Lena. So if anybody'd like to have one of them, they're individually wrapped. They're by my desk. You're welcome to enjoy one. Yeah, I think, yes, Ole and Lena are always, we're safe on Ole and Lena. Long
I
time
prefer
residents.
your bread and honey butter.
Yes, Mayor Fabian. I am looking forward to doing that again this year. I'm hoping that by the time we get to my usual season of doing so, that we're going to be able to do that. I'm ready for the baking. I got everything ready to go.
Mayor of what city, so I know which city to avoid?
The greatest city in Minnesota, Roseau.
Ah,
Excellent walleye fishing up there, by the way. Though sometimes if you fish on the US side, you get better walleye than on the Canadian side.
Thank you for entertaining the troops while I was gone, Senator Kiffmeyer. I appreciate it very much. I have now put my computer back into the hardwired docking station, and then I'm told maybe this will go better. I'm not sure, but we'll do the best that we can. I think we are done with testifiers. Is that correct, Senator Jasinski?
That is correct. I didn't open it up for any questions, but both testifiers have testified.
Any questions by members on this particular file? If not, Senator Johnson, any final remarks?
Yeah, I would like to again thank Officer Tuttle and Mayor Fabian. Mayor Fabian was last year the big push here down in the legislature to getting these bills heard and get them drafted and everything. So these are really Mayor Fabian's bills, and the work that Officer Tuttle did to put them together. I really, really appreciate that. So thank you for your consideration and time today, committee.
And thank you, Officer Tuttle and Mayor Fabian, for coming in today. These are always very interesting and good bills to handle, so we appreciate you coming in with them. At this point, members, I would entertain a motion. Senator Coleman, would you like to make that motion to pass this bill under general orders?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that Senate File 257 be recommended to pass and be referred to general orders.
All those in favor of Senator Coleman's motion, please signify by saying aye and give me a thumbs up, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay with a thumbs down. The motion passes. Senator Johnson, Senate File 257 is on general orders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The next bill up is Senator Jasinski, Senate File 289. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. In front of you is Senate File number 289. I know there's some familiar faces that from transportation in 2019, but there's some new members. This bill came before us in 2019. It was brought to me by the Chamber of Commerce. I understand this year it's one of their top priorities. This bill is a freight optimization or network optimization tool, which will allow us to use our highways, our ports, and our railroads at the highest optimization. It uses data and mathematical models to reduce transportation inefficiencies. It analyzes the site locations to help lower the cost of moving goods across the state. Identifies investments that relieve these bottlenecks that we see. That's the summary. I'm going to turn it over to the experts. And actually, first I'll have Bentley Graves give his background, and then we'll turn over to the experts for their testimony on how this tool works. I will tell you there is a appropriation for $1 million. There's been some discussion on that, whether it covers the cost of administration or not. To my understanding, it does, which would be a recommendation by MnDOT to add one full-time person to oversee this process. I'm asking for this bill to be laid over for possible inclusion. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bentley Graves with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your partnership on this bill, Senator Jasinski. As Senator Jasinski said, this is a bill that's been several years in the making. It actually grew out of conversations over the last several years between public agency folks, private industry leaders, about how to leverage the strengths of our state and growing the many important industry clusters that we have and that drive our state's economy. As Senator Jasinski mentioned, optimization is a tool that's routinely used in the private sector to help figure out ways to streamline supply chains. But increasingly, it's a tool that's being leveraged in the public sector as well. For example, 2016, the Iowa Department of Transportation developed a network optimization model to identify opportunities for increasing efficiency of freight movement on its highways and improve synergies between highway, rail, and airports. It actually leveraged the tool to secure $26 million in federal grant money to help fund a new cross-dock facility in Cedar Rapids through a public-private partnership that's projected to drive over $50 million in savings annually for Iowa shippers. Nebraska and Florida have or are in the process of developing similar tools. South Dakota recently contracted to build a statewide tool for optimizing snowplow routes. And here locally, the St. Paul Port Authority developed its own optimization tool to help improve its competitiveness and profitability. So, one important additional aspect to this that Senator Jasinski mentioned is that, in Iowa, for example, the Economic Development Authority is using the tool to show companies how locating in Iowa or expanding in Iowa can reduce their transportation supply chain costs as compared to other locations. And, while many states offer incentives like tax rates or low interest loans or utility rate breaks, Iowa's helping companies analyze and reduce their supply chain costs with data in their optimization tool. And, certainly the hope is that this is a tool that's also leveraged by MnDOT to help them identify where they can get the biggest return on investment, the biggest bang for the buck for public infrastructure investments on the freight network side. So I appreciate the opportunity to connect with the committee today. And again, thanks, Senator Jasinski, for bringing this forward. We do have a couple of actual experts here, Lee Munich from the University of Minnesota and Rick Langer from Quetica, a company that does this kind of work and has done this work in other states. And Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'm sure they both have a good bit of wisdom to offer to the committee about this too.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. The first testifier I have up then next would be Mr. Munich. Welcome
Mr. Chair.
To the committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Lee Munich, and I'm a senior researcher at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And I do research on transportation policy and economic competitiveness. We've done that with funding through MnDOT and CTS, Center for Transportation Studies. We've been doing work in the last few years looking at the freight economy, and we've been focusing on key industry clusters in Minnesota. Two that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. One is food. We did a study of the grain industry a couple of years ago, where we looked at what's happening with the grain industry, changes that have occurred over the last 20 years. And, if you weren't aware of it, almost a third of the trucks on the road are hauling grain in Minnesota. So it's an important issue in terms of MnDOT, in terms of the transportation system, as well as connections to ports and that sort of thing. We did get some help from Quetica in the optimization group that was referred to here in terms of the Iowa study and some of the data that we needed. I should say that freight issues have become much more important in recent years. We started this work before COVID, but we found that supply chain issues, understanding how freight works, getting good data on how to optimize the system is important in terms of our economy. The other industry that we've been looking at recently is the health and med tech industries, looking at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, the medical device industry. And we found there that it's the importance of the air transportation and with Delta being largely sidelined, a lot of those medical devices travel in the belly of those planes. Getting them to the airport, congestion issues. We've also found that medical device industry has a lot of suppliers located around the state of Minnesota, electrical equipment and plastics and that sort of thing. Companies like Amatec and Jackson and Montevideo that makes harnesses for medical devices. So these are sort of statewide issues, and understanding the economy, how the freight economy works is difficult. It's while there's a lot of data on commuters and passengers about the system, it's much more difficult to get this kind of freight data because it's all collected by companies, and this is competitive information. And we think that this proposal that would fund a major study similar to the one that went on in Iowa, but focused on Minnesota freight issues would be of great value to the state. And we think that the work that we're doing at the University of Minnesota using GIS tools could benefit from that as well and help in terms of policy decisions. So what are, we've been working with MnDOT, DEED, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and the newly formed Global Wellness Consortium that is looking at how to deal with supply chain issues coming out of the COVID pandemic. As you're all aware, there have been major disruptions that have occurred in some of our key industries, food industry, as they've shifted from servicing restaurants to getting food to supermarkets, and so there have been, and part of that relates to the supply chain organizations as well. Likewise, in the medical industry, there have been supply disruptions that have occurred, problems getting supplies from various vendors around the country, as well as getting to markets. So we think that one of the keys to economic development is increasing the productivity of the overall system. And we think that companies have certainly figured out how to use information technology to optimize their supply chains, but the public sector needs to have a better understanding of how that works to shape their public policies. And we see that particularly coming out of COVID and concerns that companies have with their international supply networks, there may also be more economic development opportunities that could emerge from these supply chain disruptions in the future. And having a good database on how to optimize a system could be of great benefit. So those are my remarks on this.
Thank you, Mr. Munich. The next testifier we have is Mr. Rick Langer. Are you there, Mr. Langer? I see Mr. Langer's name up there. He's just unmuted. Are you going to go video or strictly audio, Mr. Langer? So far, Mr. Langer, we're not hearing or seeing anything. Okay, I think for the moment, we'll skip over Mr. Langer. I do see Mr. Gardner from MnDOT also on the agenda. Mr. Gardner, are you there?
you hear me now? This is Mr. Langer.
Yeah, Mr. Langer, if you'd hang on for just one moment.
All right.
Mr. Gardner, you are on mute. Did you want to testify on this bill?
Mr. Chair, I'm here available for questions as needed. I don't have testimony per se. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gardner. Then I think we've got Mr. Langer, at least on audio. Are you there now, Mr. Langer?
I am on audio, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Yeah, very good. Just introduce yourself. Let us know with whom you are associated with, and then just proceed with your testimony, Mr. Langer.
Yes, again, I'm Mr. Rick Langer. I'm the president of Quetico, headquartered in Minnesota, that does engineering and supply chain and transportation network, technical analysis and modeling. My testimony is very basic. We've built a model for the state of Iowa DOT. We built a model for Nebraska DOT. We've done work in Texas DOT, and I'm actually down in Florida right now working on Florida DOT. We've done work for MPOs, for ports, for modeling the supply chain and DOTs. Traditionally, this is sort of modeling was used for private sector. So I'll give you an analogy. Walmart will take a look at the demand for their retail products, and they'll take a look at demand for their online products, and they'll look at the potential sources. And then what we would do is we would define the multimodal network in between to move the products to the demand. And then we would actually analyze the alternative ways of moving it to the demand through our computer model and machine learning process. And we would measure the movements based on the cost of transportation, the cost of inventory, the speed, the reliability, the predictability. So we've done significant modeling for a lot of very large companies. And then we're also working on the Department of Defense for modeling a supply chain for contingency supply chain operations as well. Building models that allow them to deal with various contingencies that could occur, whether it be a weather event, whether it be a medical event, whether it be a wartime event. And we use that model. And as part of the National Academy of Sciences research board meeting, one of the DOT directors asked me if I could take a look at commodities going to, through, and from and within the state and establish a model for that commodity demand and commodity source. And could I model the most efficient way for us to move those commodities for the collective good of the state? And so we built a model, this is several years ago, and became very successful. We built the model on the as-is infrastructure. Then we built a model on greenfield infrastructure where it's not necessarily defined yet. And then we were able to compare the results and identify the largest multimodal bottlenecks, whether they be public bottlenecks or private bottlenecks that existed in the infrastructure. And then we were able to identify solutions to those bottlenecks, primarily intermodal solutions, cross-dock solutions, transload solutions, greater access to ports solutions. And we were able to take those solutions and do a preliminary engineering estimate on the cost of them. And then we were able to put together a business case on what the benefit would be back to a logistics company to provide that solution, and what the business case would be to users of those logistics solutions. And we would take that business case into the federal government and some of the other councils, regional councils, and get substantial grant money for it. We have in Nebraska, Fremont, Nebraska, we have a large logistics park, which includes intermodal solution, transload solution, and some frozen cross-dock solutions, primarily to help harden the supply chain for protein. So it's been a pretty good investment. So the investment comes from about half private sector and half federal funds for that overall logistics park. Then surrounding the logistics park, we have a lot of businesses that are relocating their facilities into that business park, so they have direct access to that multimodal set of capabilities. And so instead of having to actually dray the products to the logistics park, they actually load the container right at their facility, and they use a crane to move the container right onto the well car of the train for intermodal purposes. And so it becomes very, very cost effective for those businesses to be able to leverage that kind of logistics park or capability. In addition, throughout the state, we've identified multiple transload opportunities to locate them in strategic areas to reduce the overall cost of transportation for farmers to get access to rail for their grain, and expanded it for riverport access as well. So like I said, we've had a lot of success with it. It's a public-private partnership. It allows us to do modal conversions to make the cost of transportation, the cost of supply chain go down substantially. Most people don't know this, but the 80% of the fully landed cost of goods sold on average is in the supply chain. And so if we can reduce the supply chain cost for businesses by 12 to 20%, that's a substantial competitive advantage for them, and they want to relocate their business because of that. And my firm does this modeling. We also are able to provide the engineering support, so we get solid cost estimates across all flavors of engineering. And we're a local company in the Twin Cities, and the name of our company is Quetica, which is named by my children when we were canoeing through the Boundary Waters canoe area into the Quetico Provincial Park. So there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Langer. I think that completes our testifiers. Any questions from any members of the committee? Okay, I don't see any. Oh, Senator Johnson Stewart.
Big surprise. Senator Newman, I have a question regarding the administration of this grant through MnDOT, and I'm not sure if which of the testifiers can answer, so I'll leave that up to them. The language is vague as to the fact that this lump sum covers all costs, including administration, and I am just curious. I don't know what my latitude to ask the question is, so forgive me if this is inappropriate, but who's deciding that MnDOT needs to hire a new person just to administrate this program? And what input will the Lee, for example, will you have on that decision? That's my question, Senator Newman.
Senator Johnson Stewart, that is an appropriate question. I don't know who's going to try and answer it for you, but it's an appropriate question. Mr. Gardner, do you want to weigh in on that? You are muted, Mr. Gardner.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair.
There you go. Very good.
Senator, I'm Bill Gardner. I'm Director of the Office of Freight and Commercial Vehicle Operations at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And that hiring of one person is really based on our estimate of what it would take in terms of staff support to both acquire and use this tool. In particular, trying to work with a variety of organizations to make it useful, both for ourselves in the work that we do in terms of freight planning and the investments that we make in freight infrastructure, specifically in the areas of public water ports, through our Port Development Assistance Program, through our Minnesota Rail Service Improvement Program on the rail side, and also some of the highway investments that we make using federal freight funds that are made available to us, and working and developing those partnerships that Mr. Langer spoke of, that Mr. Munich spoke of, to really make it useful for both public agencies as well as the freight industry in Minnesota to try to have a more productive freight system in the state. So it's a big commitment for us in terms of getting this off the ground, working with those partners. And we think a dedicated person will be needed to do that, and that we would need a resource for that purpose.
Senator Johnson Stewart, follow-up?
I do have a follow-up, Chair. So the 1 million that's in this appropriation or in this specific bill, does that fund only 1 year, or the continuing costs over and over? How will MnDOT fund that position over time? That's my question.
Mr. Gardner.
Mr. Chair, Senator, that's an excellent question. I think one of the things that we would need to figure out is sort of a model for that long-term sustainability of this tool. One of the provisions is to make it accessible to both private and public organizations. And I can conceive of maybe several different options that might generate even a revenue stream, a service bureau, if you will, or some sort of an arrangement, potentially even involving the university with research that might help bring together different sources of revenues. The short answer is we don't necessarily have the answer to that question for long-term sustainability, but this would get things going for the next few years.
Okay, is it any follow-up? Very good.
Thank you, Senator Chair Newman, sorry.
Thank you. Senator Dibble, you are up. And you are, there you go, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Johnson Stewart asked a couple of the questions that I was going to ask, so thank you. I think her initial hesitancy was, I think I scared everyone in orientation when I said, don't ask dumb questions in committee. But that, for the record, was not a dumb question. That was a great question.
There are no dumb questions.
I think there are.
Most of the time.
So the obviously dumb questions should be asked privately. My question to Mr. Gardner, and I'm also wondering if there are any representatives from DEED here. Mr. Gardner did answer the question about tails, ongoing costs and how those might be thought of and or defrayed. But my basic question is, this is clearly an initiative coming from outside of the agencies, being offered by the chamber and the industry and the university. It would seem, I would infer from Mr. Gardner's response that there are no red flags or overt objections on the part of MnDOT. I'm wondering about DEED as well. I'm just wondering if that is in fact the case. MnDOT, while I know probably can't embrace a suggestion that doesn't originate with the governor's office in the budget, but are there any grave concerns or objections to this initiative?
Mr. Gardner.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble, no, we think this is a tool that could provide benefits to the work that we're doing. It would supplement the data and some of the information that we currently work with, much of which comes from actually the federal government, but it's really not wholly adequate, as Lee Munich was kind of explaining. It just doesn't have the depth or granularity in terms of commodity movements, freight movements in the state, much less sort of the analysis of those flows that I think really could be useful to the work that we do, working with groups like the Minnesota Freight Advisory Committee and the freight industry in general. So I think it does have the promise of improving the work that we do in kind of a new way that lends more of an economic analysis to the transportation analysis.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
And then is there anyone here from DEED who can respond in a similar fashion?
Senator Dibble, I am not aware of anyone here from DEED. Senator Jasinski, can you help us with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble. To my understanding from MnDOT, they were open and warm to the bill, not super positive, not negative, but open to the bill. And what they explained to me was they were warm to it. So you take that as for what it is, but they said they were warm to the idea.
Senator Dibble.
Mr. Chair, it beats the alternative, which is, what do we call it, death by fiscal notes. We know when agencies don't like an idea, we find out. Yeah. So thanks. I would be interested in DEED's response, and also from Mr. Gardner, how MnDOT envisions working with and cooperating with DEED, because DEED is specifically named in the bill as a partner and a co-equal agency in this idea.
Mr. Gardner.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble, we have had conversations with the DEED staff about this. I think they are in parallel with us in terms of how we're receiving this or might need to approach it. They are members of the Freight Advisory Committee that we work with quite closely. And so we would obviously need to secure a strong commitment from deed for the economic aspects of this, identifying economic opportunities, maybe even servicing individual companies that want to relocate or modify their operations to look at their supply chains as potentially a service of deed or of the model. So, you know, we would certainly need to and want to work closely with the folks from deed on this.
Anything further, Senator Dibble?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I am not seeing any other questions from members. I'm going to pause for just a second, but I do not see any further questions. Senator Jasinski, any final words?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members for taking this bill under consideration. In my previous and auxiliary life, I'm a real estate broker. I've dealt with attracting and maintaining expanding over 24 businesses locally in my district. I think this is a great tool to keep people in Minnesota or attract people in Minnesota. It'll be a tool for economic development that may make us advantage to another state because of this tool. So I look forward to it and the economic development it may bring by increasing tax base here in the state. And again, I think it'll be a great tool. I think obviously the funding for the administration for a couple of years, I think we'll realize that it's a very valuable tool and will help those bottlenecks that a lot of us don't like, although there hasn't been many lately in the last 10 months. When things get back to normal, as you well are aware, we do have some bottlenecks, and I think this again will be a great tool to alleviate that at its best. So again, thank you, and I appreciate your time today in the meeting.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski. Senate File 289 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Next up is Senator Housley's bill, Senate File 276. Senator Housley, there you are. It's sometimes from this side, it's hard to spot people in this checkerboard. Senator Housley, welcome to the committee. Go ahead and present your bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the A1 amendment.
One moment. Yes, Senator Housley, I have the A1 amendment. Is that an author's amendment?
It is an author's amendment, and this is my first stop, and this is to get the bill in the shape I'd like it to be.
Senator Jasinski, would you like to move the A1 amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move the A1 amendment.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
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 Those opposed, no, and a thumbs down. The motion passes. The amendment is adopted. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason for this bill, Senate File 276, is we've all heard the stories of the newly turned 16-year-old that's so excited to get his or her driver's license, only to find out that the backlog at DVS is months and months behind. And you've seen the news stories where they're camping out overnight just to try and get an appointment early the next day. Anxious parents have driven miles and miles, taking days off work to trek across the state to a site that has an available appointment. And then they pray their child passes the test, because if they don't, they go right back into that queue again. So all of this delay happened even before COVID. And then when COVID hit, it only got worse. So as with the previous version of the bill, I had it last session and it passed off the floor 37-30. This bill will allow private behind-the-wheel instructors to be certified by the state of Minnesota to administer Class D driving tests. The Department of Public Safety would develop a uniform standard on which students are tested and approve the acceptable testing routes, and then an audit third-party testers if necessary to ensure the program's integrity. The bill allows third-party testers to conduct the behind-the-wheel examinations. It has these third-party testers to be trained and subject to the same rules and regulations as current DVS staff already is. And the testers are required to conduct the exam the same way as DVS does. The bill also states that a third-party tester is the same person that provides the behind-the-wheel instruction. Then they can't use the same routes as they did for training as for testing. And it also requires the third-party tester to submit records of each examination to the DVS so that they can audit and, if necessary, investigate the third-party testers. It also says that the tester can't be related to the person taking the test. And it mirrors the current rules indemnifying the state testers. The state and third-party testers are held harmless from claims brought by someone injured due to an accident caused by a previous client of the tester. And this bill has the effective date as will be August 1st, 2021. Mr. Chair and members, I think this is a real common sense solution to the backlog of driver's tests that we've had around the state. So with that, that's the bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Housley. We have two testifiers on my list. The first would be Director Emma Corey. Director Corey, welcome to the committee. It's nice to see you again. If you would identify yourself for the record, state your position, and proceed with your testimony, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Newman. It is good to see you again. Happy New Year. My name is Emma Corey, and I am the Driver and Vehicle Services Director. Vice Chair Jasinski, Senator Dibble, members and staff, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide a testimony today. There are 4 points that I would like to share in reference to this bill regarding third-party testing for Class D road tests. First, I just want to share with the committee that the Office of the Legislative Auditor, OLA, is right now in the midst of completing a very comprehensive program evaluation of our exam stations. They have done a fantastic job of working with DVS staff, and in order to look at all aspects of our exam stations, our operations, our road test process procedures, timelines, appointments, all of that, they are getting close to providing a report. We are looking forward to that report as well, because it will certainly allow us to put in place some changes as well as some enhancements that we are looking at moving forward. For a minute, so that is number one. I would ask for the committee to consider this legislation post receiving that report so that it can inform legislation such as this. Secondly, I want to just speak for a minute about the past year. As legislators, many on this team right here have played an important role in allowing us to do some things very differently in this past year at DVS. To name a few, with the help of legislation, we were able to move the knowledge test that you could only take in an exam station now to an online knowledge test. In 3.5 months, we have offered almost 43,000 knowledge tests online in the past 3.5 months. That is 85,000 people that have not had to come in to an exam station to take that knowledge test with your help. So that is one. The second thing, we have in this past year been able to move standard driver's license renewals to online renewals. We have done 231,000 online renewals of driver's license credentials in 2020, in the last year. That is potentially that many visits to our exam stations. Chair, Vice Chair, members, Senator Dibble, I want for you to, for a minute, note that your DVS is working very hard to put Minnesotans first, to put customers first, to put our business partners. We have built very strong relationships in this past year of collaboration, working with our deputy registrars, working with our DL agents, working with our labor partners in reinforcing for our employees that they add value, because we know when employees feel empowered, they treat customers with that courtesy and respect that they are afforded. We are investing in those that will directly impact the service that you speak of. In the last year, we have also we have completed 715,000 DLs that have been processed. And in the midst of COVID, we have also launched your replacement of the MNLARS system with the Minnesota Drive system. So this past year has been an unprecedented year in the way of challenges for all. But your DVS has been working to serve you. And I hope that you have had in some way, whether directly or indirectly, seen the influence and the impact of our service. Thirdly, I want to just say that if we are truly wanting to test the third-party model, I would strongly recommend that Senator Housley consider a pilot for CDL third-party testing. I would greatly support that option. And Director Hansen is going to speak to some concerns around safety and will provide some details. But when it comes to commercial driver's license third-party testing, that is a perfect place for us to pilot a third-party program, because firstly, all the concerns that we might have around compromising safety or conflict of interest or concerns around bias or unregulated testing, all of those things are addressed because the commercial driver's license testing process is so tightly regulated by the feds, by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So that would be a perfect place to offer a third-party testing model, and I would greatly support that. In addition, I would say the CDL is also a place where it could be a controlled pilot that we could see how it works and then perhaps make more decisions from there. And then finally, my fourth point is when we look at our limited resources, we have 117 examiners. We have 200 people that do approximately 135,000 road tests in the year. And so basically, this program will require a level of monitoring, auditing, training, administering that could cost approximately $2.5 million each year in order to administer and monitor and maintain. So that is money that we do not have. That is examiners that we do not have to be able to move this program forward. So it would require programming, it would require staffing, and it would require our examiners to take away from testing to train and move the agenda forward. So I will leave it at that. Thank you, Senator Newman. Thank you, Chair Newman, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Director. The next testifier we have is Mr. Mike Hansen. Are you there, Mr. Hansen?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Please, nice to see you. Please identify yourself for the record, with whom you are associated, and proceed with your testimony, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mike Hansen, and I currently have the privilege of serving as the Director for the DPS Office of Traffic Safety. And thank you for your time this afternoon. As Director Corey indicated, I'm going to bring a little bit of a safety conversation into my testimony today. I think we would all agree that safe roads in Minnesota really depend on safe drivers. And safe drivers are the product of a really high quality driver's education system and a robust testing and evaluation system that is part of that driver training program that we have across the state. Minnesota has long been a leader, a nationwide leader by almost any metric when it comes to traffic safety, and that includes in the teen driver safety categories as well. Here are some statistics and some information to maybe consider as we look at this proposal. Motor vehicle crashes are still among one of the top killers of our teens in Minnesota and across this country. Driving is dangerous, and it's dangerous when you're inexperienced, as most of our teen drivers are. The very first fatality crash in Minnesota in 2020 took the life of 17-year-old Dylan Delaney and a 15-year-old passenger 3 years later. While that in itself is tragic enough, what compounded that tragedy immeasurably is Dylan's mom, who was a first responder, was one of the first persons to arrive on the scene of that crash. In 2019, teen drivers made up 6% of the driving population in our state, but yet they were involved in 16% of the total crashes that took place across the state. In 2019, 29 teens were killed in a total of 31 fatal crashes. Preliminary information for 2020 shows us that that number has leaped to 38 teens who were killed in motor vehicle crashes. One of those crashes is far too many. 38, from my standpoint, is unacceptable, but it is better than we have seen in the past. And that is in large part thanks to much of the help that we've received from our legislative partners. Things like graduated driver's licensing, zero tolerance for alcohol, mandatory seatbelt laws, all things like that have driven our teen fatality rate down. But until we get to zero, we can't stop. One of the concerns, and I know Senator Housley, you did allude to this a little bit, is the quality control aspect of this. One concern that we would have is the drivers and instructors administering the tests to their own students. We would prefer to see that the testing is actually done by somebody independent who does not have any type of relationship with the students at all. What we've looked at in 2018, AMVA did a study kind of looking at the various systems that states use to conduct the road test. And they found that it was very clear that states that use state employee testers only are by far the safest states when it comes to their teen drivers. When you have a mixed fleet of testers made up of state employees and third-party testers, the fatality rate, both based on VMT and based on population models, goes up. And so the safest model that AMVA identified is the state-only tester. And then finally, I would just add that the Commissioner's Teen Driver Safety Task Force has looked at the legislation. They have some concerns with it, and they have recommended to us that they would oppose the third-party bill as it is authored right now. And with that, I will end my testimony, Mr. Chair, and stand for any questions if there are.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. Before I go to member questions, Senator Housley, I'll give you an opportunity to respond if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To your point, Mr. Hansen, it is the same state training teachers that train the state testers as would be training these privatized testers. So the training they would get would be exactly the same.
Thank you, Senator Housley. I have three senators on for that want to ask a question. The first is Senator Osmick. Senator Osmick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for testifier Corey. We've heard this before, and this problem continues. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the fact that the agency has tried to streamline, do what you can to deal with the situation, but the situation still exists, and it seems like it's not getting any better. I still hear from constituents saying the trouble that they have trying to get at least a reasonable time frame. I mean, if you have to wait a week or 2 weeks, that's not the worst thing in the world to have to wait. But we're still seeing this problem occur. What do you expect the OLA report to say? Because if we just take your word and say, well, let's just wait and we'll continue to work on the issue. Well, we've been hearing this for quite some time. What are you expecting that OLA report to say? Because we have to deal with the situation. It's just gone on too long. So I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Director Corey.
Chair Newman, Senator Osmick, thank you for your question. It's a fair question to ask. I do want for you to consider comments that you might have received more recently. I would really be interested in comments that you have received in the past year, in the past 6 months. And I would like to hear if you're hearing a difference in a contrast, because I want to definitely mention some more statistics here. About right at the beginning of the pandemic, you as a committee were concerned about the backlog because we had been exam stations were closed for the stay at home for almost 2 months. We had a backlog of tests. At that time, I made a promise to you. I made a commitment to you that we would make sure that we were able to overcome that backlog and more. The number of canceled tests were about 19,000 tests. I promised you that we would cover approximately 81,000 tests between May 26th and October 31st. We surpassed that number. We met the backlog and surpassed the number that we promised you. I was very nervous putting that number out because we were in the heart of COVID. There have been times in the middle of COVID that we have been down approximately 1/3 of our staff directly or indirectly impacted by COVID, but we met and exceeded. This last summer, we did more road tests than we had done in 2019, pre-COVID. The other piece is that if you have driven past Arden Hills, Plymouth, Egan, or been outside Town Square, I would like to hear if you are seeing lines like you did last year. We have instituted a virtual lobby. The virtual lobby puts customers first. We care about customers being out in lines in temperatures like this. We are working on getting sheds so that they can check in a shed. But once you are checked into the virtual lobby, you go back to your car and wait, or even if it's going to be 15 minutes, you can make a choice to do a chore. But you will get a text and you come back and you are served at our exam stations. We are making progress. This last year has been a contrast to where we have been. COVID has been a forced pilot for us. I assure you that every decision that DVS is making is focused on 3 things in this past year: health and safety as a topmost priority, customer-centric solutions as our second priority, and third is our focus on collaborative relationships with our business partners. Because if we at the DVS, along with our 174 deputy registrars, join hands in serving Minnesotans, we are so much stronger. That is already coming to fruition. I would certainly like to hear if you are hearing differently from last year or the year before.
Senator Osmick, any follow?
Ms. Corey, and I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that is what's happening. Do you have any measurable statistics that show month by month the wait times and that information? Because I don't believe we've received anything like that. It would be very helpful to see on a monthly basis how the centers have progressed and have a measurable statistic to show what's going on. Can that be provided?
Director Court.
Chair Newman, Senator Osmick, absolutely. I believe maybe midday yesterday, we sent to the chairs what we call the DVS backlog report. It is a detailed, almost over 40-page report that talks about a lot of different statistics on the measures taken, the progress made, and the solutions that we are looking to put in place in the coming weeks and months. So I can certainly get that out to the members of this committee. Absolutely.
Anything further, Senator Osmick? Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Chair Newman. Hi, Emma. It's good to see you again. I have a couple questions, starting out with Director Corey. What is your annual budget, and who do the employees at the current test station, which department do they work for? DOT, DPS, DVS?
Absolutely.
Director Corey.
Chair Newman, you will have to agree that I'm getting better at the way we respond here. So I'm trying to. I
Yes,
remember
you are.
You were very gracious at my first testimony. But Chair Newman and Senator Johnson Stewart, absolutely. So DVS is one of the large divisions, along with Minnesota State Patrol, as part of the Department of Public Safety. Our examiners, our exam driver services is part of DVS. We are all employees of the Department of Public Safety. So that is one part of your question. Secondly, you had asked about our budget. We have a total budget of driver and vehicle. So basically, all driver license, ID, driver services, as well as all vehicle services and support services. $67 million is our total budget. The revenues that DVS, my division, brings in annually is $1.5 billion.
Holy cow.
Senator Johnson Stewart.
So thank you, Director Corey. So the budget you gave me is even for license tabs and stuff. It's not for the examination. Yes. Which part? So how much is your budget just for the examination portion? How many million?
Corey.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Newman, Senator Johnson Stewart. So it's almost half and half for driver and vehicle. So 67 million total for all, including support, our complete call center, all of our administration, our titling programs, as well as exam. So so it's approximately 25 million on the driver services side.
Senator Johnson Stewart, to follow up.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Newman. So as Director Corey mentioned, the cost of overseeing this privatization would be approximately $2.5 million. That is a 10% increase in your current budget. And I just would like to bring up the point that I would be very excited to see the improvements in your service if you were in fact allowed to spend that $2.5 million in expanding your own services versus paying to administer private companies. I also want everybody to know that I am one of those parents. I have slept overnight in the Plymouth exam station 3 times. It was a horror. That was 6 and 8 years ago, and I do have anecdotal evidence that it is in fact better. I have one last question, Chair Newman, sorry.
Go ahead, Senator Johnson Stewart.
So my question is for Senator Housley. Senator Housley, are people waiting in line to be third-party examiners? What have you heard from businesses, and who exactly would step up to serve this role?
Senator Housley.
Mr. Chair, Senator Johnson Stewart, we have heard that it would be the driver's testing schools that would be doing this, that want to do it. And that was actually the genesis of this bill, is it was a driving school that came to me because a lot of their students weren't allowed to, or they had the long wait times to get their driver's test. So they said, what, doesn't it just make sense that they do their behind the wheel with us, they get all their hours with us, just makes sense that they could just get their driver's test through this. So yeah, I have had the private driving schools come to me with this.
Senator Jasinski.
Oh, okay, that's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thanks, Senator Housley, for bringing this bill. As some of you know, I did the third-party testing for school bus drivers. That program has been phenomenal. I've got lots of great positive feedback from that, and it's working very well. One of the things that I have some concern, this goes to Director Corey. So my local deputy register has a DVS testing station there as well. And obviously in the last couple of years with the switch from MinLars to MinDrive, as we've talked about, a lot more work has been put on their shoulders for input. So what used to take them, 8 strokes now takes them 21 strokes. And we've talked about that. We're working on that with the MnDrive system. One of the concerns I have, and I think this would free up some of the testing, so there's no local number that dials in for these testing stations locally. To my understanding, it goes through a call center somewhere, and my deputy registers say they get overwhelmed with calls that come in because they have a local number. They know that the DVS is located next to the DRs, and they've been overwhelming the calls into the deputy registers. So the deputy registers have to take the time to take the calls, refer them to how to get through to DVS, which takes away from their time that they're making their money as a small business to do DVS's work and not collect a fee on these. So I believe this bill will help that, because all these calls won't be coming in because they're getting overwhelmed, and again, or set up a better number. But from what I'm hearing from my deputy registers and people that call in, they have a tough time getting through to set these tests up. And for some reason, those calls are going to the deputy registers, which they should not be having to do because it's not their business to be doing that. So can you address that issue and how this bill might affect that? Thank you.
Director Corey.
Chair Newman, Senator Jasinski, thank you for the question. And firstly, most importantly, Senator Jasinski, thank you for your willingness to be in the trenches with us when it comes to working on solutions and conversations with our deputy registrars. I definitely want to acknowledge that you are willing to be part of those conversations, which is greatly appreciated by me. When it comes to our deputy registrars, we are certainly working together on a monthly basis. I am speaking with all of our deputy registrar community, meeting with our boards, with our MDRA board and our Dr. Boa board monthly during this time for the launch of the new system and moving forward. So yes, I am familiar with the concern that you talk about. What our strategy right now is that we are addressing the operational pieces so that the number of calls is reduced, not band-aiding the call volumes. The call volumes are there, and what we are working on is trying to reduce the call volumes by addressing the issues that are at heart, whether that is the availability of appointments, whether it is concerns with notices that went out, whether it is something to do with renewals or changes in regulations. So I think at this point, what we are trying to do is work with our deputy registrar. So for example, if you were to look at our deputy registrar at Rochester, they were one of them that were dealing. I'm very intimately familiar with the concern that you talked about. So the solution that came up was they did come up with a voicemail, for example, up front that says, if you are calling about a DVS question, here is the number. So that they were not needing to take that call, but they knew that there was a volume of DVS. So we're working together for shared solutions that look at what is the issue at heart and how can we address it. So I think the fact that we are not working in silos is already addressing some of those concerns. Now, taking the calls away from the exam stations and putting them at the call center is absolutely the right decision, because now we have our pool of call agents able to address that. We are continuing to work on that. We know there is work to be done, but those are exactly some of the issues that we are working on solutions for.
Okay, members, just a general reminder, it's about 20 after 4. We've got another 10 minutes. We have 2 more senators who wish to ask a question, and I have 1 follow-up question myself. So Senator Jasinski, do you have any follow-up question, or are you ready to move on?
I'm ready to move on. I just want to make the comment, though, that by doing this in this third-party testing, we're alleviating those issues. And again, so I get frustrated, as many of you do, when you make a call and you get an answering machine, when you can actually, our deputy registrars are providing a service to our citizens. And when someone can call up a number and receive a person in person and not a recording and not push this and push that, that's a service that they're providing to our people. And by your recommendation to go through a voicemail system and to push 1 to push 2, it's again, it adds to that, and it's not providing the service that I think these deputy registers want to do. Because as you well know, Director Corey, I've worked with a lot of these deputy registers, and these businesses are really crucial to what we have. Deputy registers, as you well said, are a very, very valuable group that provides service to our DVS and DPS. So again, I'm frustrated. I'm bringing a fee increase to that. You'll see a bill on that as well, or maybe a reallocation of how those fees are going. But deputy registers are spending a lot more time inputting information that is benefiting DPS and DVS, and they're getting paid the same fee. And that's my frustration, along with, as I brought before, the scanners and all those things that they're spending extra money on. So again, I just think this is something that would help relieve some of that backlog and make it more efficient and provide more options for our people in Minnesota. So thank you again, and thank you for addressing my concerns. And I do appreciate working with you and the deputy registers to make it better for Minnesotans. Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my first question is to you, Mr. Chair. Do you is this bill moving on from here today, or is it being held over for possible inclusion in a larger omnibus bill later?
Senator Dibble, the bill has to go to a couple more committees, and it will move on from here today and go to state government.
All right. Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, first I'll just make a comment. I understand the frustration that Senator Housley is articulating and expressing by offering this bill. I think we all have heard from our constituents about the past backlogs, and it was pretty extraordinary and pretty extreme. That being said, we do have the legislative auditor's report that is going to be a fairly thorough and comprehensive analysis with recommendations. And we have, already the pretty dramatic improvements that Director Corey talked about. And so I think, we might want to wait and see, what results from the recommendations, and also acknowledge the hard work that's already been done. My question, if Senator Housley might respond to, some of the critiques that have been articulated, especially around what Senator Johnson Stewart was asking about. There's a line towards the end of the bill that says that all of the expenses have to be absorbed by the agency, and they can bring on no additional staffing. And I don't think anyone can argue. I mean, there was a fiscal note on this last year. I had a chance to take a peek at that over the last couple of days. This is a substantial amount of work that we're asking the agency to do within their existing resources. So Senator Housley, would you be open to at least allowing for an appropriation from the driver services and the vehicle services funds, so that this work can be carried out to the extent that those appropriations are available, or contemplate some sort of a fee schedule, so that these private interests that are going to be making money from offering the service, this is going to be, they're not going to do it for free. It's going to, it's going to be for profit, that they pay some fees in order to be able to administer and deliver this testing.
Senator Housley.
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, you're correct. The bill currently, the language says that the department does absorb the cost to implement this program. I'd be willing to look at any language that you have. I don't support any extra fees, because those will get trickled down to the end user. I don't want it to cost any more to get it at a private testing site than it does at the state site. So I'd be willing to have the conversation with you going forward on our way to the next committee, gladly.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't think there's any language that controls what exactly those who are accessing their testing from schools, from driving schools. And right now, people take their tests for free, unless they have to come back for a third test, and then they are charged for a third test. So Senator Housley, are you contemplating that people would be able to take their driving exams for free at these schools?
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, and that is the understanding that I heard from the driving schools, is this is part of the package. So it's not a separate fee. It's part of your package with your behind the wheel training.
Senator Dibble.
And on that point, Mr. Chair, Senator Housley, did I hear you say earlier that there is going to be some sort of a separation between those who are giving the tests and those who administered the driver's education? The reason I ask that is because I think that's one of the critiques that has been brought forward both last year and again this year, that there's a built-in conflict, if you will, or an incentive for these driving schools to pass these students so that they successfully get their driver's license, even if they maybe haven't shown the same level of proficiency that maybe they would have to if they were taking their test at someone who has zero interest in whether or not they pass their test. They're only interested in how proficient they are as a driver. Is there a way to control for that concern of conflict and built-in kind of perverse incentive?
Senator Housley.
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, I was just looking through it, and it says that the third-party testers are trained the same from the same DVS staff, and that the third-party tester is the same person that provides the behind-the-wheel instruction. So I haven't heard any conflict of interest, and maybe Ms. Stengel could help me with where that is in the bill, the language.
Ms. Stengel.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm not sure if this is exactly what Senator Housley had in mind, but on page 7, line 19, there's the third-party restrictions. And basically that says you can't test somebody you're related to. You can't test somebody with a physical disability who may need individualized restrictions. And you can't test anyone who hasn't completed all the coursework and training. And those are the limitations on who you cannot test.
Senator Housley, does that answer your question?
Yes, so Mr. Chair, thank you, Ms. Stengel. So if you could reiterate what you're trying to say, Senator Dibble, about the conflict of interest, you're saying that go ahead.
Well, Dibble.
A number of other states allow for third-party testing for commercial driver's license exams, so people can qualify and get their CDL from a private third-party tester. But there are pretty strong federal regulations and state regulations that say the person who delivered your driving education to become a commercial driver can't be the person or the entity that tests you, because built into that is a conflict, is an incentive that they pass you, because then you can say I taught you, and then you got your driver's license, and you get this whole package. And so I think the concern is that it lowers the standards that those who are being tested have to achieve, because, and so I would be much comfortable with this idea if it was a completely different entity. If it's going to be within the same company, maybe create some sort of a firewall like they have at law firms or something, so that the person who's giving the test has no interest in whether or not that person passes or not. So that's the concern that I have. And then finally, Mr. Chair, I'll just speed this up because I know we want to get to other questions. I'm concerned about the lack of any provisions for background checks for those who are administering the test. I know there's a provision for keeping driving records on hand, but there's no standard for that I saw for for those driving records, just having them on hand and available for inspection, and otherwise there are no other kinds of background checks. And and I'll just go back to that concern about the expense that the agency is going to be put to. And this is potentially having to administer and oversee the competency and and on an ongoing basis of maybe hundreds of testers across the state. That's a significant chunk of work that we're asking the agency to be put to without any consideration for the budgetary constraints. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. We now have Senator McEwen. You are up. Senator McEwen, it is 4:30. I would ask you to be as brief as possible. because I also have one question that I know is going to be very brief. But if you would go ahead, Senator McEwen, and keep it as quick as you can, please, because we are at the end of our committee time.
Very good, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to comment. I am one of those parents. I have a 15-year-old right now with his learner's permit. I am taking suggestions for where in the Twin Cities are good places to have a 15-year-old practice driving, so send them my way. In Duluth, we have lots of dirt roads. Down here, not so much. So, but my concern really was about that conflict of interest. And I would add, you know, I've watched my son go through the classroom training, and then he got the clear to go ahead and take his test, and he took the test online. It was very convenient. It was great. He passed the online test, and then we had to go to the DMV to for him to actually get his permit license. And I can tell you, I think everyone dreads having to go to the DMV. I know from my past experiences long ago, I was worried, you know, standing in line in the wait. This was the best trip to the DMV that I have ever had. It was in December. And when we went to the DMV in Duluth, it was so organized. We went up to the front door. They took my cell phone number. They gave us, you know, made sure that we were on their list. They had us go back to wait in our warm car. They sent us a little text when they were ready. We had waited maybe 5 minutes for them to tell us they were ready. We went in. We didn't even have to stand in any line. It was all distanced. It was very safe. We went up to the front counter. The person who was helping us was so helpful. There weren't any angry people in the lobby waiting. It was just very, very organized and was very efficient. So I just want to thank you, Commissioner Corey, for that organization. It's very impressive to have gone from a backlog like that to have an experience for parents and young drivers where we go and it's that efficient and that streamlined. I was really impressed with just how great it was. So thanks very much. And I am taking those suggestions for where to teach the 15-year-old how to drive in the Twin Cities. So thanks.
Thank you, Senator. My question, it would be for Ms. Stengel regarding rules. Ms. Stengel, on page 7, beginning on line 715, there is language in there regarding rulemaking authority. Am I correct that under that section, the third-party testers would be obligated to meet the same kind of requirements as the state testers?
Mr. Chair and members, that is correct. Those are the rule sections cited on line 716 are the ones that govern state testing. So bringing that in by reference and applying it to the third-party testing.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I had. Senator Housley, any further comments before we vote on your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I said, this passed off the Senate floor bipartisan at the end of last session, 37-30. It is a common sense solution to the backlog of driver's tests around the state. And I know there's many moms like Senator McEwen that are going to be starting to make those appointments and wondering where she can get her son or daughter getting their driver's test. So I think it's a good solution. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for hearing it, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator Housley. It is my understanding that Senator Dibble has requested a roll call vote. Is that correct, Senator Dibble?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
There will be a roll call vote. I would at this time entertain a motion to move Senate File 276 be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the state government.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski. With that, we will take a roll call vote. Just because we are on Zoom, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to have our committee LA come up to my computer and call the roll.
Chair Newman.
Yes.
Senator Jasinski.
Yes.
Senator Dibble.
No.
Senator Carlson,
No.
Senator Coleman,
Yes.
Senator Johnson Stewart,
No.
Senator Kiffmeyer,
Yes.
Senator McEwen,
No.
and Senator Osmek.
Aye.
For a vote of 5-4, the motion passes, and the bill is being re-referred to the Committee on State Government. Ms. Stengel, I have a question. When the motion was stated, I don't remember if it was referred to as Senate File 276 as amended.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe that it was, so perhaps you may want to.
Okay. We're going to have to redo it. I'm sorry if I missed that, members. I would entertain that the motion be to re-refer Senate File 276, be recommended to pass as amended, be recommended to pass, and be re-referred to the State Government Committee. Mr. Woodridge will now take the roll.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Senator Osmek.
Just as a mechanical situation here, I think you need to reconsider the vote and then pass it as amended. I think you can't just pass it a second time. I think the proper motion would be to reconsider and then pass it. Just my opinion.
Mr. Chair, and Senator Osmek, that is correct. That would be the cautious and appropriate procedure to do.
Thank you, Senator Osmek. I would entertain that motion to reconsider the vote.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
All those in favor of the motion to reconsider the vote, please signify by saying aye with your thumbs up.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay, thumbs down. Motion passes. At this point, I would assume, Ms. Stengel, we are now in a position to revote on the motion to pass. Okay. So at this point, then, I would entertain a motion on Senate File 276 that it be the bill as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the State Government Committee. Mr. Woodridge will now take the roll call vote.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Jasinski.
I think I didn't hear it again. As amended?
As amended, I did say as amended.
So moved, I would make that motion.
Thank you.
All right, Chair Newman.
Yes.
Senator Jasinski.
Aye.
Senator Dibble.
No.
Senator Carlson.
No.
Senator Coleman.
Aye.
Senator Johnson Stewart.
No.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
No.
Senator Osmek.
Aye.
A vote of 5-4, the bill Senate File 276 as amended, the motion passes and it is re-referred to the Committee on State Government. Members, I apologize for the clumsiness. We're just going to have to get used to it. But I do appreciate your patience. There are no further matters on our agenda, and we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.